Calculators. Calculators are available on state tests in the online format, handheld calculator, or both forms, depending on the test being given. Regardless of the medium that the calculator is provided, whether handheld or online, the rules that govern their usage remain the same. To use a calculator, a student must have the need documented on their plan, which includes documentation of the disability's impact on mathematics, calculation, or reasoning, have used the calculator in routine instruction throughout the year. The plan should also clearly indicate if the student should receive an online calculator or handheld calculator. If the student has a valid calculator accommodation, then that calculator is allowed on all sections, including non-calculator sections of tests. It should be noted that the calculator accommodation is a disability accommodation, not an EL accommodation. Oral native language support shall be based on a student's individual language needs as documented in the PSP. It is not limited to any specific time frame. It may range from specific vocabulary to rendering entire assessments into the student's native language. It includes directions in all parts of the test that the student needs translated. Flexibility of test administration schedule is allowed to meet the needs of interpreters. Bilingual or English dictionaries are available on some state tests. They can be print or electronic. It should be noted that you need to read the testing literature for each state test on how the dictionaries should be provided. Some may require a handheld dictionary. Some may require the use of an embedded dictionary in the testing platform, and others may require the usage of an electronic version on a tablet or exterior device. Some tests may not allow the accommodation. It is important to read all test administration manuals for each test being administered to determine how to handle this accommodation. If bilingual or English dictionaries are allowed on the test you are administering, there are some specific guidelines that must be followed. The dictionary should only provide word-to-word translation without definitions. All additional capabilities must be turned off, including the internet, translating whole phrases and sentences, etc. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing oral native language support. Flexibility for test schedules is not permitted unless the student has oral native language support marked on the PSP. If there is a shortage of interpreters, EL students may use a different test administration schedule as long as it occurs within the district-established testing window. Paraphrasing and simplified language may be used for directions only and is not a supported accommodation for state assessments. The proctor may only paraphrase or simplify directions. Test content, questions, or answer choices may not be altered. Once time begins on a state assessment, nothing can be paraphrased. Please note this is not a change in policy. An accommodation is a support for inclusion of special populations. Because paraphrasing can be used on test directions only for all populations, it is not a support for special populations and is therefore not an accommodation. Extended time. Extended time is allowed on state assessments for those taking the general assessment. Extended time is not an alternate assessment accommodation because that is not a timed test. Extended time can be in the form of time and a half or double time based on a committee or team decision for that student based on data and observation. Regular time must be used appropriately in order to receive extended time. If for some reason a student does not use regular testing time appropriately, for example, they sleep for 55 minutes of an hour-long test, you may deny extended time to that student. Make sure you document everything in as much detail as you can muster. Turn that into the building assessment coordinator so they can properly document why that student was denied extended time. Students should be provided extended time based on the committee or team decision documented and guidelines the building assessment coordinator have laid out. Some schools keep the student in the same testing room while others relocate them to a library or lounge. That is all a local decision, but follow building protocols for those students. Reinforcement and behavior modification strategies are allowed on state tests. This can include testing a student with behavior issues in a one-to-one environment to prevent disruption for other students. This is a local decision. Behavior modification or reinforcement can also involve using positive behavioral interventions and supports as indicated in a student's behavior intervention plan and/or IEP as decided by the ARC 504 team based on data. You could use verbal, tangible, or tactile reinforcements for being on task. The student can be tested in a separate location outside the regular classroom. They cannot influence, impact, or disturb other students. And they can use technology to focus attention or reduce stress. Now, use of technology for these students does not mean they could use a text reader. It means if the student is given computer time as a reward for on-task behavior, then the student can still get that computer time reward after testing is complete for the day. Alternate assessment students can have their breaks during the assessment since the alternate assessment is not timed. Reinforcement and behavior modifications are a disability accommodation, not an EL accommodation. Interpreters for a student who is deaf or hard of hearing. The student must have a verified disability in the area of hearing and use sign language as the normal mode of communication. An interpreter shall not indicate correct answers or define words, provide content, teach vocabulary or concepts. Any person not working in a certified position who is providing assistance for a student shall read and sign a non-disclosure agreement provided by the department. And now we are to our seventh and final check for understanding. Question 1. If a student qualifies for a calculator accommodation, the student may use the calculator on any test, including the non-calculator portions of exams. True or false? The answer is A, or true. Question 1. If a student qualifies for a calculator accommodation, the student may use the calculator on any test, including the non-calculator portions of exams. True or false? The answer is true. If a student qualifies for the calculator accommodation, they are permitted to use the calculator on any test, whether that test allows the use of a calculator or not. Question 2. Paraphrasing and simplified language are not permissible accommodations for the content portions of state assessments. True or false? True. Paraphrasing and simplified language are not accommodations for special populations for state assessments. They can be used for all students for the directions only. Question 3. Which of the following is not true about the usage of bilingual dictionaries? A, they must be printed. B, they should only provide word-to-word translations without definitions. C, they may be electronic. D, internet or any additional capabilities must be turned off. The answer is A. This is a tricky question because bilingual dictionaries may be printed copies. However, they do not have to be. Electronic copies are allowed as well. Question 4. If a student is denied extended time on a state test, the test administrator should do the following. A, take thorough notes on why the decision was made. B, contact the building assessment coordinator and inform them of why the decision was made and provide them with the notes. C, both A and B. D, none of the above. The answer is C. If a student is denied extended time on a state test, the test administrator should take thorough notes on why that decision was made and provide those notes and notification as soon as possible to the building assessment coordinator for proper documentation. Question 5. A student has behavior modifications on his or her IEP and routinely disrupts normal classroom instruction. What needs to be done to test this student one-to-one? A. Contact KDE for prior approval. B. Contact USED for prior approval. C. Choose not to test the student. D. Follow district procedures. KDE will leave this decision to local school systems. The answer is D. This is a local decision that does not require the involvement of KDE or USED. Simply follow your district procedures. If you are unsure what those procedures are, contact your building assessment coordinator or district assessment coordinator. This concludes the inclusion of special populations regulation training for today. If you have any questions about anything we discussed, please feel free to contact our office by emailing dacinfo@education.ky.gov or by calling 502-564-4394.